I'm here with Don McGuire, Chief Marketing Officer of Qualcomm. And we're going to be talking about some big industry trends and some of the things that CMOs think about at night. So welcome, Don.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's dive right in. Okay. One of the topics we've been talking about with the C-suite in our community is CMO tenure, where different reports have pegged the average senior CMO tenure these days at ranging from 25 to 40 months, depending on the source, but looking at really the lowest level in about a decade. It's the kind of thing where, a new CMO will come in, you learn the business of the brand, you figure out your agencies, you build your team, and then that, it's a blink of an eye, that 18 months, that 24 months has passed, and it doesn't always give you the opportunity to even get your feet wet and do the work. So, it's a tricky conversation, but I'm very curious about, your take and what's going on with the CMO position in this industry, and how can we ensure that future CMOs are set up for success?
So interesting question. I've obviously seen the statistics and read them as well. And I've been a CMO now. I'm a freshman CMO, or I just graduated from my freshman year, being a CMO for a little over a year and a half. So I'm within that window. But what I've learned, and because I've had these conversations and I've been to a few events over the past 6 months where this has been brought up and talked about amongst CMOs, and a couple insights. One is there seems to be a disconnect in the C-suite. And what I mean by that is I was shocked by how many CMOs do not have strong relationships with their CEO and their CFO, or their CFO and that, I think, is a recipe for disaster. Because when things go awry, or when things aren't meeting objectives, or if the business is challenged, whether it's macroeconomically or just from a sector perspective, if relationships are shaky, that's when the blame game begins, and that's when people are looking for reasons, right, as to why things are going wrong, and then that could lead to, change in management. And I was actually surprised. I am, I guess, fortunate or lucky that I have a very strong relationship with both my CEO, who's my boss, and our CFO, who I view as a business partner, not as a bank, right? Or not as someone who's just going to say no. So I think that the disconnect in the C-suite is one contributor. And because that disconnect also leads to a lack of understanding of what the role of marketing is. And I have, in a lot of companies, there's that disconnect of what the role of marketing is. But it's even worse in tech. Because I'm a tech marketer, I've always been a tech marketer, and I've always worked for companies that prioritize things like engineering and R&D and other things over marketing. And so I've always been challenged to actually elevate the role of marketing and educate and convince the rest of the C-suite that marketing is important. It's not just a function, or not just a place to park SG&A expense, but it's actually a driver, a business driver. And so this disconnect in the C-suite, I think, is one contributor to the short tenure. That's one insight. Another thing I think is we don't speak common language. Marketers and marketing has its own language. And that's great when you're talking to other marketers, right? But when you're talking to stakeholders across the aisle or outside of your cocoon, they don't understand what you're talking about half the time. And so understanding language and having a common set of terminology, KPIs, and metrics that can be understood industry-wide or even across industries is something that we're missing as marketers. CFOs have a standard set of KPIs, right, that they're measured by, that Wall Street measures them by, that the boards measure them by, whether it's EBITDA or whatever it is. Marketing, we have, first of all, too many, and they're all different. So I think if we came up with a standard set of KPIs that are well understood, and that made sense to everybody, then when you're talking about measuring and what drives tenure as a byproduct of poor measurement or lack of measurement, then I think that would be helpful in maybe not using marketing as a scapegoat and then driving that change management or that change in management. So those are just two insights that I think I've learned. And again, I'm still fresh, I'm still new, but I can't imagine being successful without number one, having those strong relationships with those two, especially those two very important stakeholders, and number two, being able to speak their language. And I think maybe if those two things were in a better place, we would see that tenure number go up.
I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Especially as painting that picture as marketing being a profit driver, not a cost center, right? And being able to tell that story in the language and through the measurement that is, understood by everybody, right? So I think you're onto it there. So we've talked about now the managing up piece. So let's flip it to the other side.
Okay.
Arguably, the other biggest part of a CMO's role is building the marketing organization. And something that we talk a lot about with our community are all the different skill sets, the areas of expertise that you need to account for. There's new technologies, new tools, new platforms, new apps. Every day, there's something else to think about. How do you ensure that you have the right team to build that world-class marketing organization? And what approach do you take to make sure that you have the right people?
One general comment I make is tap into the creator generation. Gen Z is the first an authentic creator generation, right? They can do more with a cell phone camera and a ring light than production studios could do 10 years ago. And so you got to tap into this generation, and you got to give them the freedom to work in a new model, in a new way. You can't bring them into your organization and then apply old thinking or force them into a model that worked maybe 5-10 years ago, because that's not the way they work, right? This is the generation that learns by watching and doing. They've lived their life, in video. And so you've got to understand that, and you've got to tap into that. So that's one thing in general, as far as talent nurturing and incubation, tap into Gen Z. And it can help you in so many ways, right? Ideation, innovation, doing things in a more optimized, cost-effective way, and still getting a great end product. Because if you've been in your job for a while, if you've been part of a marketing organization for a while, these models set in. And it's like, okay, I need a brief. And then I need to take the brief, and I need to give it to an agency. And then the agency needs to come back with a creative brief. And then everyone needs to capitulate on the creative, and then it goes on and on and on. That doesn't necessarily need to be the case, right? And you see what some of these Gen Zers are doing with storyboards and $1,500 in rented equipment, and they're producing amazing content, especially when you're talking about a screen that's this big, right? It doesn't have to be cinematic for IMAX. And so that's one thing. It's just, that's a macro comment I'll make, is about tapping into Gen Z and the creator generation. Another thing is just balancing subject matter expertise with generalists. And I think you need to have a good mix of both. You definitely need those disciplines, right? That insight into analytics, right, and data. There's really, really important disciplines that you need to have as part of your marketing ecosystem in order to deliver on the results that you need to deliver for the business. I think data and analytics, both from the front end on the research side and on the back end on the measurement side, are very important. And I think kind of in some cases may be considered an afterthought in a lot of marketing organizations. I think they need to be more front and center. And getting that talent to actually produce that end-to-end, I think is important. And then separately, one thing that we've done in our organization is we've introduced an innovation practice. It's something that, we talk innovation, but there wasn't anybody focused on it. How can we become more innovative, whether it's just simply through efficiency, which is a form of innovation, or, hey, are we missing things, trends, things that are happening? What's coming 3 years? What's coming 5 years down the road with regards to technology, tools, styles, right? Where's the art community headed? What's going on with gamers, right? And all your different audiences, we needed an innovation practice. So we built that in as a core competency of the marketing organization. And so that's another thing I would say is important from a talent kind of incubation and nurturing perspective, is build in innovation as a kind of a practice and a cultural norm, not something that's an afterthought.
You want people to be excited and passionate, and when you're charging them with being innovative and thinking about the future, you're really tapping into that, future forward, right? So I love it. So let's kind of, spin on that. You mentioned trends, right? So we'll jump into the lightning round now, right? So It's January of 2023. It's a few days removed from all of our New Year's parties, and everybody's talking about different industry trends, either specific to your category or just for, macroeconomically or specific to marketing. are there any trends that are top of mind for you just as you're planning for the year?
Yeah, I think a couple trends that I have been looking at and make sure that we don't want to miss is how we rethink audience engagement in a post-COVID world. I think there was the pre-COVID world. I think there was the adjustments that everybody had to make during the pandemic because behaviorally things just had to change. And everything went from in real life to digital sort of overnight. There was a technology adoption curve, though, that happened with consumers that normally takes 6 years. It happened in 18 months. So how do you take that and what happened and then adjust your storytelling and how you market to your audiences, understanding what just happened to the world. So that's one thing that we're really looking at in 2023 as some sense of normality gets back into the swing of things. It's the new normal. And it's not the old normal, and you have to pick up on those cues. So that's one thing that I'm looking at. Another trend is 2023 from a macroeconomic perspective is kind of a dumpster fire. So how do we optimize, still invest to grow, but how do we refocus our resources so that we are A, connected to business objectives, but B, investing to grow so that on the other side of this downturn, we're in a position of strength and not weakness.
And I think that's a question a lot of folks are grappling with is, right, we just finished marketing through a pandemic. Now we have to go through marketing through economic uncertainties, right? So, and that presents its own set of challenges. So to know that you're thinking about it, I think, right, there's a lot of similar sentiment out there. So let's get into the buzzword bingo portion of things, where there's, you're here at CES, there's really two words that you can't not hear in every conversation, right? So let's start with the metaverse and broadly Web3 technologies. Sure. There's certainly been a lot of really interesting experimentation over the last year. And I'm curious about your opinion and your thoughts on where these technologies come into play. Where are we as an industry? What those opportunities might be for our industry and kind of leveraging Web3 in the metaverse?
So we don't have a horse in any race as far as what the metaverse will become. There's lots of points of view, right? There's lots of opinions out there. If you talk to gamers, they've been in the metaverse for 5 years. If you talk to Mark Zuckerberg, right? It's coming and it's going to be big. But there's all these different points of view and like we're in, right? We're excited. I think experimentation is good because in order to innovate, you have to iterate. But I think let's not get over our skis. Because the foundational technology that's going to be required for this idea of altered states of reality, whether it's reality, whether it's augmentation, or whether it's virtualization, there's a long way to go, especially if we're going to scale and make this something that is inclusive and not exclusive, right? Today, this idea is tied to having a certain device, being able to afford a certain XYZ, being in a certain connectivity environment, right? And that is not what I think the metaverse can be. But in order to get there, and no matter what your socioeconomic status is, no matter what your geographic location is, no matter where you are in the world, your access to the tools and the infrastructure needed to experience some of these types of leveled reality types of things, we are on a journey and it's going to take some time. But I think it's going to be a huge opportunity for marketers because it's going to provide new ways to engage with audiences, current audiences and new audiences that can never be conceived of before, right? Talk about immersive experiences and taking that to the next level. Letting people come inside your brand, right? Not just exposed to your brand and being aware of your brand, but entering into your brand in a way that's very tangible. That is something that we haven't been able to experience until the advent of this idea. And again, long way to go, right? Lots of development that has to happen. We're in a position where we're actually helping to enable that development. So from our point of view, it's like, hey, yeah, we're in and we know where the roadmaps are going, and we see the inflection points, but it's going to take us a while to get to scale. And so when people raise their hand and say, hey, I'm in the metaverse, I just did an NFT. well, are you really?
Right.
And I've never seen an acronym fall into favor and fall out of favor so fast than NFT. So I think it's, there's a lot of hype, as you said, but I think the idea of delivering experiences in altered states of reality is real, and I think it's going to provide huge opportunity for marketers.
Fantastic, right? And to your point, we need the experimentation to kind of figure out where we want to go and what's possible, what's not possible today, but might be possible tomorrow, and build towards that future.
Absolutely.
All right, so same question, but for the other big buzzword, which is AI, right? And again, this is not, our AI, machine learning, these are technologies that have been used, for marketing by marketers, but certainly seen a resurgence in conversation, new developments with things like DALL-E or ChatGPT. Where do you see these technologies going as far as being used by our industry?
Well, I think obviously AI is becoming more and more pervasive. My personal opinion is that AI doesn't have to be scary. And I think that there is a certain sense of fear when you say the term or hear the term AI. It conjures up, old movies that you watched where robots were taking over the world and killing us all. So, and that's not what AI is. AI is simply a set of algorithms or a learning algorithm that should, if used for good, make your experiences better over time by analyzing behaviors and then anticipating those behaviors so that things become more seamless and more automatic. And we actually just launched a campaign called The Edge of Possible with Michelle Yeoh, and it's all about humanizing AI, right? And about AI is really there to, as you engage with your digital life, whether it's in your smartphone, whether it's in your connected home devices, whether it's in your car, whether it's in your clothing, whatever, that over time, the anticipation of what you may or may not want to do and decisions you may or may not make are anticipated, and they're made faster and easier for you. And that just helps you move through life better and provides that seamlessness. And if it's just looked at like that, I think people will be less afraid of it, number one, and we can actually make more progress in deploying some of these tools in a way that I think is productive.
It's really kind of shifting the conversation from doing things for you or instead of you to helping you just do the things you're doing in a better, more efficient way.
Right. You're still in charge. Right. So I think that positioning of it and then using those technologies and tools to then deliver on that promise, I think that's the right recipe.
All right. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much, Don, for joining us here at Brand Innovators, sharing with me, sharing with our community. It's been a pleasure having you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful.